Welcome to Credopard Cast, the podcast for entrepreneurs and line managers seeking opportunities to grow their sales organization.
I'm Thomas Zartlo, CEO of Credopard, one of Germany's largest independent contract sales organizations for the healthcare industry. Thank you for having me. If you like the Credopard Cast, feel invited to subscribe and like. We are now present on several podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast. In case you would like to provide some feedback or suggest a topic for upcoming episodes, send an email to info@credopard.de. And here we go with our today's episode. Why the dog barks when he sees a cynic. About thought patterns in sales. More than 2,000 years ago, a counterfeiter fled to Athens. While living there for some time, he didn't find it awkward to shout at the people, calling them cowards, materialists and decadent. While the address appreciated his sense of openness, they nonetheless felt somewhat disturbed. Therefore, he was invited to leave the city and to shout elsewhere. Since the man was in the mood for wandering, and Athenians helped him to keep his motivation by underlining that otherwise they were considering beating him to death, he accepted the kind proposal and introduced his ideas all across Attic Greece. In doing so, he became famous, so famous indeed that apparently Alexander the Great wanted to meet him. When asked what he would fancy from him, the powerful and famous king of Macedonia, the old fellow answered with a short, "You're blocking the sun, move on." You certainly already guessed, we are referring to good old Diogenes. This ancestor of all hippies preached a back-to-nature philosophy and suggested that people should break with conventions and start thinking for themselves, although not in the most friendly way possible. This unconventional philosophy made the people of his time so furious that he called him a dog, in Antique Greek, Kyon. The guy liked it since he felt that dogs were a perfect embodiment of his way of life. They were eating when they felt hungry, sleeping when they felt tired, and laid in the sun, that apparently was very important for him, whenever they saw an opportunity. So Kyon became the term of his way of life, and finally this term developed into cynicism. Diogenes' cynicism was a kind of ethical skepticism paired with a high level of demandlessness. When rediscovered in medieval times, his ideas still were so powerful that clerics felt a strong opposition and gave the term the significance we still use: an attack on all conventional ways of thinking. You might wonder what on earth a very much simplified review of the Cynic way of thinking has to do with sales, in particular since Diogenes certainly was utterly against any form of commercial consideration. Freeing people from their demand is quite contrary to selling them something. But bear with me. In between other things, the classic cynic was very much defined by a fundamental skepticism against all established patterns. A remarkable quality of their thinking was the readiness to break with conventions. As a matter of fact, this is precisely what we should do in a dynamic world, and it's exactly what we don't do. The faster the world is turning, the more we are tempted to seek stability. This might be great for our psychological health, but it is actually quite bad for our purses. Where the old cynics were aiming for materialistic and intellectual independence, we try to stick to well-established and trustworthy patterns for mastering our life in a dynamic environment. This is helpful as it indeed reduces the risk for failure. Still, it is not great, taking into account that all the other people might feel the same way, which eventually leads to a situation where all are doing the same and no competitive advantage can be generated. To give you an example, did you ever take a cautious view on modern website graphics? Give it a try. You very fast will recognize that many websites are using a similar way for drafting people: disproportioned, flat, powerful persons with massive bodies. This style is called Allegria and was initially used on Facebook. It became trendy in recent years and is doubtlessly a fantastic yet simple design. Who is using it is certainly not wrong, but is also nothing special. What applies to graphic design also is true when reviewing product or corporate messages. How often will you read something like, "People are in the center of our thinking"? I do not doubt the honesty of this statement, but does this create any attention? So what can we do? We certainly cannot all relocate to old wine barrels and shout towards our CEO that he should the hell step out of the sun. At least this does not feel right, given one would like to keep his job. But what if we were permitting ourselves more non-conformity? Of course, product information, particularly for health-related products, have to follow legal standards. But does this mean that all product folders have to look the same? Obviously, one needs an opt-in before sending an email, but is it really the best way to start all of those messages with a "Dear Dr. XYZ"? Doubtlessly, a consistent message across all communication channels is key, but does it need to be always like, "Our product is easy to be taken and grants high patient compliance"? Ask yourself. We still consider the in-field sales calls a potent tool. Otherwise, companies were not spending billions across the globe to keep field-based staff in place. Why is it? Because medical sales representatives can establish a personal relationship with the HCP. Its most important feature is customer focus. By approaching the client individually, talking the way they speak and addressing their challenges, they can establish a solid and very personal relationship, differentiating themselves from their competitors. So why should the rest of your client communication be created in a way that pleases all, eventually ending up in a wording that does not upset anybody, but also not engaging them? When building personal relationships, we use a broad repertoire of different approaches. Diversity is the key success factor in this game. Granting permission to work under some premises such as sales orientation and compliance to ethical and legal requirements is what it needs to succeed. But this also requires a level of openness and will to break with conventions. In short terms, it means to be a cynic in the original sense of the term. Is your organization, are you ready for this? Based on my experience, I'm not so sure. Frequently speaking with decision makers, I sometimes witness certain traditional thinking because they are somehow caught in a highly complex and robust net of rules and regulations created by corporate standards and procedures. A client recently denied a proposal for a new contract, not because the proposal was bad, but because if he had put it in place, he had to seek approval across the entire organization. This had taken ages and caused a lot of discussions on several levels of his employer. Although being more costly, he saved the time independently from the financial loss by keeping the old contract. There are dozens of other examples, and they all point in the same direction. Instead of creating a trend, people follow the path they always followed. I think it's time to open up, take the risk, and try new ways. Not because they are unknown or new, but because they will grant early adopters a significant competitive advantage in a highly competitive market. Let's be cynical in the best sense of this term. It's original. Your today's takeaways. Trust your intuition and stop playing it safe. The more you rely on instruments everybody is using, the more you will lose competitive advantages. Demand critical thinking from your service provider. Where are the new ideas? What would they challenge? If they agree to everything you say, they are most probably unable or unwilling to create any additional value for you and your organization. Everybody is doing it is no argument but a signal for a massive lack of thinking. When you too would like to experience what "we do this for you" signifies for you and your organization, contact us by phone on +49 for Germany 6102 375 3440 or click on www.credopard-solutions.de. Like and subscribe to our podcast for receiving your weekly update. Credopard Cast is available on Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, and other major platforms. Suppose you would like to suggest a topic or provide feedback, please send an email to info@credopard.de. Our topic next week: LinkedIn and your Salesforce, a lost opportunity. In the meantime, I wish you all the success you doubtlessly deserve. Stay healthy and remember, Credopard, we do this for you.